It's funny how big things, life-changing things, can start so small. For me, it began with just a little flicker on a screen, a tiny blip in the system that most people would have just scrolled right past. But sometimes, that's exactly how it starts, a small, almost invisible crack that eventually splits your whole world open. My name's Chloe, and for 4 years, I was what you'd call the quiet one. I was a systems engineer at this booming tech company, Innovate Solutions, a place that seemed to love its fancy buzzwords, scalability, synergy, disruption, way more than it loved its actual people. I wasn't the type to give flashy presentations or dominate meetings. My job was to make things work seamlessly, silently in the background. And they did work, because of me, until one day they almost didn't. I saw the cracks in that company long before anyone else. I lived in them, really, because I was always the one patching things up, the one noticing the little tremors before they became earthquakes. And one Thursday afternoon, those cracks nearly swallowed Innovate Solutions whole. Panic, It erupted. Teams just scattered. Managers, the ones who were always so loud about leadership, they just vanished. But I stayed. Not because anyone asked me to, not because it was technically in my job description to pull an all-nighter playing digital firefighter. I stayed because I knew, deep down, if I did, no one else could save it in time. That night, I was the only thing standing between total system collapse and the company's survival. I poured everything I had into it. And my reward? The next morning, they fired me. Just like that. A cold, sterile email. One sentence, no thank you, no explanation. But here's the thing they didn't know. The one tiny detail they never bothered to check. My name, Chloe Miller, was still on the one account that controlled everything. The master key to the entire kingdom they thought they'd locked me out of.
Let me take you back to that Thursday.
It was about 4:13 in the afternoon. I remember seeing it, just a flicker, a tiny database hiccup. You could blink and miss it. But I'd been working with that system for so long I knew its moods, its little tells. It was subtle, like someone clearing their throat in a library, but to me, it sounded like a siren. 5 minutes later, the alerts started pouring in. CPU spikes, API failures, query timeouts. The team chat just exploded with panicked messages and those red-faced emojis. Is this global? Client X can't log in. Restart the cache. Voices, digital and real, were everywhere, frantic. And then, the worst sound of all, silence from the people in charge. One by one, I saw them log off, reassigning tickets, just disappearing. But I stayed. I had to. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about responsibility, I guess. I opened my terminal, 3 windows side by side, and I just dove in. My fingers were flying across the keyboard, almost faster than I could think. At some point, I wasn't even reading the error codes anymore. I was feeling them. I knew which module was about to buckle. I remembered this one patch I'd written, 6 months before, one they never bothered to document. I knew how to trace this memory leak that everyone else ignored because, well, I'd fixed it before, quietly, after hours, when no one was looking. They called it teamwork when things went right, but what it really meant was Chloe will handle it. No applause, no promotion, not even a hey, good job. Just this silent expectation that I'd always be there to clean up the mess. By 6:30 that evening, the office was mostly empty. The CTO, Mr. Henderson, sent out this vague message about regrouping tomorrow. I didn't even bother replying. I was already 10 steps ahead, rolling back microservices, patching the riskiest endpoints, building this temporary firewall rule that, honestly, they probably wouldn't even understand if I tried to explain it. Then the lights in the office started winking out, one by one, on their motion sensors. I was the only one still there, the only one moving. I think I paused once, just long enough to take a sip of my coffee. It was cold by then, bitter. A perfect metaphor for the whole situation, really. It was 9:30 p.m. when the alerts finally stopped. No catastrophic crash, no public meltdown, no screaming headlines the next day. The system, which had been on life support just hours before, was stable, breathing again. I leaned back in my chair, my shoulders aching, my palms stiff from typing. The office was pitch black, except for the glow of my monitor. The log scrolled by on the screen, like credits at the end of a movie no one else had stayed to watch. I caught my reflection in the dark window behind my monitor. I looked like a ghost, pale, eyes dull. A ghost in the machine I'd just single-handedly saved. My hand trembled a little as I reached to close the terminal window. It wasn't fear. It was pure exhaustion. But deep down, somewhere in that tired haze, I felt this premonition. This wasn't a victory. It was a warning. They'd forget this night. They always did. But I had a feeling that soon, they'd remember me for reasons they could never see coming. When I finally walked out of that office building, the sky was that depressing, washed-out gray that comes just before dawn. My legs felt like lead. I hadn't eaten in, probably 12 hours. My fingers still throbbed, and the hum of the servers seemed to follow me all the way home, echoing in my ears. But I'd done it. The system was back. Clients wouldn't know a thing. The press wouldn't get a whiff of how close it all came to disaster. And somewhere in the back of my exhausted mind, a tiny, foolish part of me dared to hope. Maybe this time, someone noticed. Maybe this time it would be different. I woke up about 5 hours later, still in my work clothes, shoes still on, slumped on the couch. The first thing I did was reach for my phone. 17 Slack messages, 4 unread emails, and 1 company-wide announcement. I tapped on that one first. It was from Mr. Henderson, the CTO. Kudos to the team for staying calm under pressure yesterday, it read. Special shout out to Ethan for stepping up during a critical time. Proud of our people. Ethan. Ethan, my manager, had left at 5 p.m. He hadn't touched a single line of recovery code. He'd posted 1 bug report, and then, poof, gone. I waited. I thought maybe there was a follow-up message, a correction, maybe they'd tag me something. But there was nothing. I refreshed the thread, scrolled through the replies, the emojis, the little haha, legend. Comments under Ethan's supposed heroism. No one said my name. No one even hinted that I'd been there, let alone that I'd fixed it. That silence, wow, it burned more than any insult ever could. Because an insult means they at least see you. This was like they were deliberately airbrushing me out of the company's history. Then, as if the universe had a twisted sense of humor, something else popped into my inbox. It was a forwarded internal email thread probably sent to me by mistake. There was another Chloe in marketing, I think. But the subject line hit me like a punch to the gut. Payroll optimization. Phase 2 candidates. The body of the email listed criteria. Non-client-facing roles, low visibility, minimal disruption potential. That was me. That was describing me perfectly. I wasn't being flagged because I was bad at my job. I was being flagged because I did my job too quietly, too invisibly. They were planning to cut me, and I'd just saved their entire operation mere hours before they could finalize it. I opened my laptop again. Don't ask me why. Maybe I just needed to see the proof, to know I hadn't imagined the weight of what I'd carried that night. System logs, stable. Firewall, holding 100%. The patch I deployed was still running, smooth as silk. It was beautiful, clean, solid work. And no one would ever know. Just then a little ping. A Slack message from someone on the SRE team, a guy named Ben. Hey, I know it was you who, and then the typing bubble vanished. Message deleted. He'd typed it. He'd thought about acknowledging me. And then he'd actively chosen silence. That one unfinished, deleted sentence, it did something to me.
It didn't shatter me, not exactly.
It hollowed me out. I put my phone down and just stared at the wall. Not at the screen, not at the code I'd written, just at the blank, empty space. Because that's what I'd become to them, wasn't it? Nothing. And I knew right then, no matter what came next, they had already decided I didn't belong. Even before I saved them. The next morning, my inbox was chillingly empty, except for one message. Subject line, HR notification, action required. No greeting, no warmth. Just a cold, corporate execution order. One PDF attachment. One sentence. Please acknowledge receipt of the attached notice by end of day. I didn't even need to open it. I knew.
But I did anyway.
Some small, stubborn part of me still clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't real. Termination effective immediately. Internal restructuring. That was it. No mention of my performance. No recognition of my contribution, especially not the 18-hour marathon that had kept their lights on just 2 days before. Just numbers. Just a name on a list. My name. The same list I'd accidentally seen the day before. Payroll optimization, phase 2. Candidates. Low visibility, minimal disruption. I fit their criteria perfectly, didn't I? I went into the office anyway. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or maybe a little bit of defiance. Or maybe I just needed to see it for myself, to feel the reality of how it was all ending. The security guard at the front desk, old Mr. Peterson, he just waved me in like any other day. The elevator dinged its familiar tune. The doors opened onto our floor. Everything looked exactly the same, like nothing had happened, like I still belonged. Until I got to the HR floor. Brenda, from HR, greeted me at the glass door with this tight, manufactured smile. She was clutching a manila envelope like it contained radioactive waste. "Hey, Chloe," she said, her eyes darting everywhere, but at me. "Thanks for coming in." I didn't say anything. "This won't take long," she added, already sliding that dreaded envelope across the desk toward me. "Your final paycheck, NDA reminder, benefits continuation paperwork. You can email if you have any questions." "Who made the decision?" I asked. My voice was surprisingly steady. She hesitated, just for a second. Then the corporate shield went up. It came from above. "Reorg committee. You're not the only one affected, Chloe."
Right.
I wasn't special enough to save, just invisible enough to cut. "Is David here?" I asked. David was my direct manager, the man who once told me I was the quiet engine that kept Innovate Solutions running. Brenda gave this little diplomatic shrug. "He's in back-to-backs all morning. He knew I was coming. He knew I was being fired. And he still couldn't face me." On my way back to my desk, I passed the break room. Laughter spilled out into the hallway. And there was Ethan holding court, passing around a box of donuts, bragging about how we held the line during the recent instability. No one even glanced my way. I sat down at my desk. It was still untouched. No one had even started packing my things. For a moment, I just stared at my keyboard. Then, I don't know why, I powered on my laptop. I fully expected to be locked out, to see that cold gray access denied screen. But no. The dashboard lit up instantly. Admin access. Terminal privileges. Root credentials. All still valid. My name, Chloe Miller, was still listed on the master account, the only one that truly mattered. They'd erased me on paper in their HR files, but they hadn't erased me from the system. Not yet. I just stared at the screen for a long, long time. I could have shut it all down right then and there. Flipped every switch, locked every digital gate. But I didn't. Not because I forgave them, not because I wanted to be the bigger person. No. I wanted them to forget me completely. I wanted them to believe I had just vanished, that they were safe. Because only then, only when they felt completely secure, would they never, ever see it coming. I sat there, in the back of the nearly empty office, at my same old desk, in my same old chair. But the air felt different. Colder, thinner. Like it didn't have room for me anymore. My name wasn't on the internal employee roster, I was sure of that. But it was still written deep within the system, in the very bones of the company. I opened my laptop again, not to check email, not to argue or fight. I just needed clarity. Something tangible. Something that told me I wasn't crazy, that I really had been the one holding everything together. And there it was. Terminal access. Active. Root permissions. Untouched. My credentials still sat at the very top layer of the master access hierarchy. Whoever processed my termination, they either forgot or they just didn't know how deeply I was embedded in their infrastructure. Or maybe, and this felt more likely, they just assumed someone else would clean it up later. But no one had. I toggled open the architecture tree. Full visibility. All nodes alive. I could see every subsystem, every credential trail, every little ghosted patch that I knew no one else even knew existed. One command line, just one, and I could have changed everything. I hovered my cursor over the log entries. The temptation was there, I won't lie. Not to destroy anything, no, that wasn't my style. But to mark my presence, to leave some kind of signature encrypted deep into the core of the system, like a tiny, invisible scar. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps, hesitant, approaching from behind.
Hey.
I turned. It was Noah. He was one of the few people I actually used to talk to there. Not a close friend, exactly, but he was the one who brought me chicken soup when I had that awful flu last year, and we'd spent 3 straight nights debugging a nasty memory leaked together last fall. He was a good guy. Didn't expect to see you, he said, fidgeting with the cuff of his sleeve, looking uncomfortable. I could say the same, I replied, keeping my voice even. I heard what happened, he said. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't say it's wrong. He just stood there, his eyes flicking between me and my still active laptop screen. I wanted to say something during the meeting. When Brenda announced the list, he added, his voice barely above a whisper. But you didn't, I finished for him softly. He nodded, and I could see the shame in his eyes, hanging in the quiet space between us. I figured they'd have taken your access by now. I just looked at him. They didn't.
He didn't ask why.
He didn't need to. We both knew what that kind of oversight meant. You, planning to do anything with it? He asked, his voice low. I closed the terminal window, slowly. Not yet. Noah stood there for another moment. Then he reached into his pocket and placed something small on my desk. A little white USB drive. You always said backups aren't optional, he mumbled. Thought you might want one. I didn't smile, but I met his gaze and took it. He nodded once, then left without another word. I plugged the drive in. Not to copy anything malicious, not to plant any seeds of chaos.
No.
I just wanted to preserve the map, the full system layout, the credential tree, the names of everyone who had access, and more importantly, those who no longer did. I encrypted the folder and labeled it simply, Legacy Root. Not revenge, not leverage, just proof. Proof that I was still there in a way, that I had mattered, that in the cold, digital bones of this company, my name was carved in places they'd forgotten to erase. I logged out for what I thought would be the last time, unplugged Noah's USB drive, and tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat, right next to that manila envelope Brenda had given me. The weight of the drive was small, almost insignificant, but somehow, it felt like enough. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't go online and vent or post cryptic messages. I just sat at home, in my quiet apartment, sipping chamomile tea, watching the city lights flicker outside my window. They looked like server lights on a massive, distant rack, cold, impersonal, blinking for no one in particular. I realized then that power didn't always have to be loud. Sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting. It's the one who's already walked out, quietly, but still has all the keys. They thought they'd deleted me, but they'd only deleted the name on an office door. The one buried deep in their system. The one with all the access? That still belonged to me. No one asked where I went. The Monday after my termination, I heard the office was more alive than usual, buzzing with some kind of forced cheer. I went back in, not to work, of course, but to collect the last of my things. I arrived early. The lights in our section hadn't even fully warmed up yet, casting long, eerie shadows. I thought it would hurt more, to see my desk, to clear out drawers that still had sticky notes with code snippets and little reminders like "fix this if broken." But it didn't really, because it already felt like someone else had been sitting there. My inbox was locked. My calendar was gone. Even my Slack handle had been replaced by that generic gray silhouette that just read "deactivated user." But the worst part, the part that really got to me, wasn't the technical erasure. It was the people. By 9 o'clock, the core team started rolling in: developers, project leads, the people I had spent years working alongside, day in and day out. And they just walked past me, like I was a stranger, a piece of furniture. It wasn't even malice, I don't think. It was just complete detachment. At 9:15, someone brought in cupcakes. By 9:30, the big whiteboard near the kitchen read, in fresh dry erase marker, "We survived the Q2 meltdown." I stood there, just a few feet away, holding the last cardboard box from my desk. It held my favorite mug, a worn-out stress ball, and my dog-eared copy of clean code with about a dozen tabs poking out the sides. No one said goodbye. No one even said, "Hey, didn't you?" Megan walked by. Megan and I used to have lunch together every Thursday. She'd just been promoted to lead the documentation team. I caught her eye. For half a second, just a split second, I thought she was going to stop to say something. She didn't. She just looked down at her shoes and kept walking. Maybe she thought it would be awkward. Maybe she told herself someone else had already said something to me. Or maybe, without my employee badge, she just didn't even recognize me anymore. I stood there for a few more minutes, waiting. I don't even know what I was waiting for. Closure, maybe? Recognition? Some tiny sign that my 4 years there had meant something to someone? But I got nothing. So, I walked toward the elevator, slow and deliberate. I passed by that whiteboard one last time. Someone, probably Ethan's new favorite, had drawn a cartoon version of him, complete with a superhero cape and a laptop. Above the words, "Our back-end hero." I didn't laugh. I didn't try to erase it. I just walked out. The elevator doors closed, and I saw my reflection in the polished steel. My eyes looked tired. My hair was a bit of a mess, but I was calm. Too calm, maybe. I had walked into this company 4 years ago, full of nervous energy and a laptop sticker that read code like "no one's watching." Turns out no one ever really had been. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message from a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Megan.
"Chloe, I saw what they did."
I wanted to say something. I didn't. "I'm sorry." I stared at that message for a long, long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have said, "It's okay." I could have said, "I understand." I could have even said, "A little too late, Megan." But I didn't say anything. I just closed the app. Because some silences I was learning deserved to stay intact. Outside, the wind was cold against my face, sharp, almost cutting. I zipped up my coat and walked away from that glass tower, the one I once thought would be my future. I didn't look back. Not because I wasn't curious, but because there was truly nothing there for me anymore. Inside that building, people were celebrating their survival. But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that the person who had actually saved them was no longer in the picture. I wasn't angry. I was just gone. They toasted their success with champagne and cupcakes, blissfully unaware that the cracks were already forming again, deep in the foundations. And this time, I was the only one who knew exactly where they would lead. It took about 7 days for the first real tremor to hit the surface. On the outside, Innovate Solutions still hummed along. Meetings, Slack threads, coffee runs, that same old recycled optimism. But underneath, the first fracture had already formed. A young guy named Liam was the one who saw it first. He was the newest IT associate, only 3 months in. Bright, a little awkward, almost too polite for the corporate world. The kind of guy who still believed in thorough code reviews and probably thanked the coffee machine when it actually worked. He wasn't important enough yet to be on the big, flashy projects, so they'd bury him in low-priority monitoring, error logs, data queues, internal health checks, the digital equivalent of watching paint dry. But Liam, bless him, actually paid attention. That morning, he noticed something strange in the analytics logs. The API responsible for syncing user profiles had duplicated 3 entries, then 4, then 12. Then it started skipping sync cycles entirely. At first, he assumed it was a caching issue. He restarted the gateway. Nothing changed. Then he dove into the raw logs and saw something really odd. A script, a primitive hand-rolled thing labeled temp hold. SH, running silently in the background. It wasn't from the current code repository. It wasn't documented anywhere. It simply existed. And at the top of the script, in a single line of faded comment text, it read, "Temp patch CM. Hold until next deploy." Liam blinked. He didn't know anyone in engineering with the initials CM. Not anymore. He asked around. No one had any answers. Not even Sarah, the lead systems engineer who'd been with the company for years and knew everything. "That's Chloe," she said eventually after a long, thoughtful pause. "Chloe Miller. The one they let go last week. She wrote this." She wrote a lot of things quietly, while everyone else was on Zoom calls bragging about their sprints. Liam frowned. "But if this patch is failing now, doesn't that mean—" "It means the glue is coming undone," Sarah said, her voice flat. "And no one around here remembers what she used to hold it all together." Meanwhile, across the building, the core team, including Ethan, was prepping for a major pitch for the 3rd quarter. They needed everything to be fast, flawless. The system had to look absolutely bulletproof in front of this huge potential client, one that could bring in nearly 40% of the company's annual revenue. But the platform was sputtering. Response times had tripled. Scheduled processes were freezing mid-execution. Important client files were rendering as blank pages. Customer dashboards just went white. Ethan, still basking in the glow of his hero status from the last crisis, tried to bark orders and regain control. Restart the nodes. Reindex the queues. Flush all the background processes. No one said it out loud, but you could feel it in the air. The code base was buckling, and they didn't know where or why. Elsewhere, Sarah pulled Liam aside. "Keep digging," she told him quietly. "Look for other scripts like that. Anything with CM on it." Liam did as he was told. He pulled archive logs, compared builds from previous software versions. And he started seeing the patterns: silent patches, undocumented corrections, manual overrides that bypass the company's polished, but often flawed, deployment pipelines. Each one solving a major problem with brutal, invisible efficiency. And each one had the same quiet signature: CM, Chloe Miller. I had never been in the spotlight when I worked there, but now, in my absence, my fingerprints were suddenly everywhere. That evening, Liam sat alone in the empty break room, staring at his terminal. On the screen, another flagged process error blinked back at him. This one traced back to a legacy permission handler, one with a master credential reference pointing to a still active root account. The user ID read, Camiller Internal. He just stared at it, his heart probably thumping. She still has access. He opened Slack and hovered over a direct message. He typed, Hi, Chloe.
Sorry to bother you.
I think I found something you wrote. It's holding a lot more together than we realized. Then he paused, backspaced, and typed again. Hope you're doing well. Not sure if this is still your number. Then he hit send. Somewhere across the city, in my quiet apartment, I saw his message pop up on my phone. I let the notification banner appear. I read it twice. And then I closed it. Not out of bitterness, not really. But because the system, in its own way, was already saying everything for me. Through its lag, through its confusion, through the deafening silence where my code used to hold all the weight. The next morning, Liam traced another system crash to a line of code buried deep in the permissions framework. An old patch, again with my signature, still active. That root ID, Camiller Internal, blinked on his screen like a steady pulse in the dark. The big client call that day? It ended in disaster. Despite all the bright smiles and pre-rehearsed PowerPoint slides, the system kept stalling, right in the middle of the demo. Graphs failed to load. Key performance indicators didn't sync. The client CTO, a sharp woman, asked a simple, direct question about a delay in their report API, and no one on Ethan's team had an answer. When the call finally ended, a heavy silence fell over the conference room, thick as dust. Mr. Harrison, the CEO, stood slowly from his corner chair, his eyes scanning the defeated-looking team. He didn't shout. He didn't slam his fist on the table. He just asked one, very quiet question. Who fixed it last time? Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Sarah, the senior engineer, suddenly found the carpet pattern incredibly fascinating. Liam glanced down at his terminal, then quickly looked away. No one knew. Or rather, no one wanted to say the name. My name. It just hovered in the air like static electricity, unspoken, awkward, but undeniably there. Mr. Harrison asked again, this time slower, his voice like ice.
Who?
Fixed.
It. Last.
Time? Liam cleared his throat, his voice barely a squeak. I think it was Chloe, sir. Mr. Harrison frowned. Chloe? Liam nodded. Chloe Miller. She used to be on the infrastructure team. She was let go during the reorg. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Mr. Harrison turned to Sarah. Why didn't we retain her? Sarah didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because the answer was damning. They had cut the quietest, most reliable, most deeply embedded engineer in the entire department because her name didn't look good on some spreadsheet because she wasn't visible enough. She wasn't part of any client-facing initiative. Ethan chimed in far too quickly, trying to justify it. Low visibility. Mr. Harrison's eyes narrowed to slits. Find her, he said, his voice dangerously calm. We don't need her forever. Just long enough to patch the hole. Across the room, in a quiet corner of the DevOps team, a new intern named Olivia had been watching all this chaos unfold in silence. She wasn't assigned to any critical projects yet. She was too new, too junior. But she had this incredible instinct for tracing problems, for digging. And right now, the whole company was one massive, unraveling problem. So, Olivia opened the archived logs. She dug deeper than anyone else had bothered to, into the raw server logs, the ghost commits, the backup chains stretching back over the last 2 years. She found my comments, my patches, tiny handwritten changes buried between miles of automated lines of code. Every single time something critical had gone wrong, there was a solution. Silent, precise, brutally efficient. And each of them was signed CM. She kept digging. Eventually, she found the credential directory. Only one root-level account was consistently active during every single major incident, every save. The logs were crystal clear. Camiller internal. Still live. Still embedded. Still connected to over 60% of the backend's core architecture. Olivia called Liam over. Then Sarah. Within minutes, her little intern screen was surrounded by stunned faces. She never removed herself, Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Liam just exhaled, a slow, shaky breath. I don't think she ever needed to. That afternoon, an emergency, all-hands-on-deck meeting was called. Mr. Harrison stood at the head of the long, polished conference table. For the first time in weeks, no one in that room was smiling. He looked around, his jaw clenched tight. I want an email sent to her tonight, he commanded. Tell her we need her. Offer her whatever she asks. Even a consultant fee, sir? Someone, probably from finance, squeaked. Especially a consultant fee. Mr. Harrison snapped back. If she's still watching, if she knows what's happening here, we need to show her we're finally listening. Somewhere across the city, I was indeed aware. Not because I'd been gleefully following their slow-motion collapse with some cruel sense of satisfaction, but because people, my old colleagues, had started messaging me again, quietly, indirectly. Ping after ping from old teammates. Hey, Chloe, random question. Do you remember that script you wrote back in Q1 last year for the? Or hope you're doing well, Chloe. We're kind of stuck on something here. I ignored most of them. But then came the email directly from Mr. Harrison's address. Subject: Request for temporary support. High priority. The body of the email was surprisingly humble for him. Hi, Chloe. I know we didn't part on the best terms, but we're currently experiencing significant system instability that's affecting key client relationships. We've realized that many of the solutions currently holding our infrastructure together originated from your work. We would be immensely grateful for even temporary support at your terms. Please let us know if you're open to discussing this. I read it twice. Then I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the city lights twinkling outside my window, and I smiled. Not out of pettiness, not really. It was a quiet, knowing kind of smile. They hadn't just remembered my name. They'd finally remembered what I carried, what I'd built, what I'd saved. I didn't reply right away, because sometimes silence is far more powerful than agreement. And I wanted them to sit in theirs just a little bit longer. By the time their formal offer finally landed in my inbox, I'd already stopped checking it daily. It arrived late on a Thursday, the subject line practically screaming importance. Formal request. Consulting engagement opportunity. Innovate solutions. The offer itself was generous. I'll give them that. Twice my former salary, complete remote flexibility, full operational autonomy over the entire back-end infrastructure. It even ended with this almost laughable sentence. We now realize your work was foundational to our long-term system health. Foundational. A week ago, they could barely remember my name, let alone spell it right on my termination notice. I still didn't respond. Not because I was trying to be cruel, though maybe a tiny part of me enjoyed their discomfort. It was more that I wanted to see what would happen when silence was their only answer. My silence. It didn't take long. By Friday morning, I received a message on LinkedIn. It was from Kevin, an associate in client success I hadn't spoken to in over a year. His message, sent at 8:17 a.m., read, Hey Chloe, I know this is weird and probably out of line, but there was a closed-door meeting this morning with all the execs and the entire client team. Someone pretty high up said that if we don't get you back, like ASAP, we could lose the Henderson account. That's our biggest one. Just thought you should know. I stared at the message for a full minute before closing the app. So, they were really scrambling now. Somewhere inside that gleaming tower of polished concrete and trendy open-plan workspaces, people were well and truly panicking. Inside what they dramatically called the war room on the 14th floor, Mr. Harrison stood facing a wall of muted dashboards, each one a grim snapshot of systems actively slipping through their fingers. The conference table was a mess of cold coffee cups, empty energy drink cans, and crumpled printouts of uptime reports that were mostly red. Sarah, the senior engineer, looked like she hadn't slept in days. Liam was typing furiously at a spare laptop, probably chasing down another ghost I'd left behind. And Ethan, Mr. Backend Hero himself, hadn't said a single word in over 10 minutes, a rare and, frankly, unsettling silence from someone usually allergic to stillness. "Any response yet?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice strained. "No, sir," Sarah said, checking her phone for what must have been the 5th time that hour. "We can't afford to wait much longer." A woman named Kira, the VP of Client Relations, chimed in, her voice tight with anxiety. "The Henderson account is already threatening to walk. Their CTO called me personally, asking why no one's fixed that ghost query bug they reported 3 weeks ago. And Liam says it's tied to a patch Chloe created, like 2 years ago. She wrote most of those critical patches solo," Sarah added, her voice weary. "Off hours, usually. A lot of them aren't even in Git. They live directly on the servers as cron jobs or buried deep in backup chains." Mr. Harrison frowned, his face a mask of frustration. "Why didn't we know this earlier?" No one answered. Because the truth was simple and deeply humiliating. They'd never bothered to ask how things stayed standing. They only ever noticed when things occasionally wobbled. Kevin, the guy from Client Success, who'd been standing quietly near the coffee cart, shifted uncomfortably. Sir? I wasn't going to say anything, but I sent her a message on LinkedIn. Just to, let her know how serious things are." Mr. Harrison didn't scold him. He just nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes.
"Good," he said.
"She needs to understand we're serious. This is about fixing what's broken." But that was the problem, wasn't it? I wasn't the one who was broken. They were. By Saturday, I had 4 more messages from various team members. Some from people I barely remembered. Some were awkward. Some sounded genuinely desperate. "Hey, Chloe, not sure if you've seen Mr. Harrison's email yet. Just wanted to let you know that we all really appreciate your work, and the execs, well, they really regret how everything happened. We're doing our best to rebuild things right this time. Please consider the offer. We really, really need your help." What struck me wasn't the sudden flattery. It was the fear. The raw, unadulterated fear lacing every word. They weren't trying to win me back out of some newfound respect. They were trying to keep their entire system from collapsing before the next quarterly audit. And somewhere in all that desperate noise, the power had definitively shifted. I didn't need them anymore. Not even a little bit. But they still desperately needed me. I opened Mr. Harrison's formal offer email again. I read every single word, slowly, carefully. Then I clicked reply. And I wrote just one sentence. "I've moved on. Please revoke my account access now." No sign-off, no pleasantries. Just the cold, impersonal formality of someone returning a crown that no one had even realized she was wearing until it was far, far too late. I hit send. Then I closed my laptop, picked up my cup of tea, and walked over to the window. The city stretched out before me, glowing, distant, and wonderfully wide open. And behind me, somewhere deep inside the digital guts of Innovate Solutions, the system they thought they'd mastered, the silence I had left behind was only just beginning to speak. In their frantic control center, Liam told me later he saw the new log entry pop up almost immediately. One final, root-level action, request access termination. Submitted by Camiller Internal. And then nothing. My ghost was finally, truly, gone from their machine. The first major client to walk didn't make a big scene about it. They didn't send angry threats or issue legal warnings. It was just a short, polite email to Mr. Harrison's office, thanking Innovate Solutions for their past collaboration and calmly informing them that they were terminating their contract, effective immediately. The reason? 3 straight days of critical system downtime, 2 major failed data syncs, and 1 unacknowledged, high-priority support ticket that had been inexplicably marked as resolved without ever actually being touched. That client, Centra Solutions, had been worth $42 million annually. When their termination notice was forwarded around the executive team, no one said anything for a full minute. Not even Ethan. The next hour, I heard, was pure chaos. Department heads started blaming miscommunication. Engineering cited overwhelming technical debt. The PR team scrambled to draft some kind of vague clarification statement, just in case word got out to the press. But it was already too late. The CTO of Centra Solutions, a formidable woman named Ms. Albright, had already updated her LinkedIn profile, exploring new vendor partnerships focused on long-term stability and ethical engineering practices. She didn't tag anyone. She didn't have to. The message was loud and clear enough. Meanwhile, I was miles away, drinking coffee at my favorite little corner shop, the kind with low lighting, old jazz playing softly, and baristas who don't bother writing your name on the cup. The chaos at Innovate Solutions? It wasn't mine anymore. I had no stake in their fallout. But then my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: Consulting inquiry from Ms. Albright, Centra Solutions. I blinked. I hadn't spoken to Ms. Albright in almost a year, back when I was still visible enough at Innovate to be pulled into those late-night client syncs and firefighter calls when things went sideways for her company. She'd always been sharp, direct, the kind of woman who didn't waste words or time. Her message was characteristically brief. Hi, Chloe, I hope you're well. I wanted to reach out privately and ask, are you available for short-term consultation work? Our team at Centra is shifting strategic directions, and we're looking for someone who understands distributed systems deeply and, importantly, quietly. You came to mind immediately. Let me know if you're open to a conversation. Best, Clara Albright. I read it twice. Then a third time, even slower. She didn't mention Innovate Solutions. She didn't bring up their system failures or the headline-level departure of her company as their client. Just a straightforward question, one that was layered not with desperation, but with respect. Genuine respect. 3 days later, we met for tea.
Yes.
Albright wore her usual slate gray blazer, her hair in a practical, no-nonsense bun. I wore jeans and a comfortable sweater and didn't bother with any corporate formalities. She got straight to the point. We're restructuring our entire infrastructure at Centra, she said. We're moving away from vendors who prioritize polish and buzzwords over genuine resilience. I need someone who doesn't just talk a big game, but who builds systems that simply don't break. That's you, Chloe. It wasn't a pitch. It was a statement of fact. I nodded slowly. What would the engagement look like? Flexible, she replied instantly. Remote, of course. A 6-month contract to start, with a very strong possibility of extension. You lead the technical design for the new architecture. We follow your blueprint. No politics. No office drama. No endless Slack threads pretending to be culture. Just clean architecture, quiet trust, and, well, the pay. She named a figure. Let's just say it was more than double what Innovate Solutions had desperately offered me to come back and clean up their mess. The next week, I signed the contract. It wasn't flashy. There was no press release, no triumphant LinkedIn post from me. Just a PDF, a digital signature, and a quiet, almost involuntary smile that I didn't even realize was on my face. Because this time, it was entirely on my terms. There was something incredibly soft and satisfying about it. Not triumphant, not smug. Just still. Like a part of me that had been dislodged for a long time had finally, gently, clicked back into place. I didn't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. I didn't need to be seen by people who had never really bothered to look in the first place. Because the ones who mattered, the ones who truly saw, they already knew. As I filed away that signed contract with Ms. Albright, another message landed in my personal inbox. It was from another, smaller client who had also recently and quietly left Innovate Solutions. The subject line simply read, "Referral from Clara Albright." About 3 weeks after I'd politely declined Innovate Solutions' desperate offer to return, their first core system collapsed. Entirely. The issue began quietly, as these things often do. Just a small, persistent memory leak in their primary logging server. Left unchecked, undocumented, and unloved, it spread like mold behind drywall. Then came the cascading timeout errors. Data failed to sync across their development and production environments. Their deployment pipeline hung indefinitely on every third push. The entire infrastructure buckled again. But this time, there was no silent fallback I'd written years ago for them to lean on. I had made sure my root credentials were truly irrevocably disabled the day I walked away and told them to handle it. By the following Monday, the company's 3 biggest client-facing systems, their main client dashboard, their critical billing module, and their internal project tracking system, had all crashed. Simultaneously, Mr. Harrison called another emergency all-hands meeting and apparently tried to downplay it, calling it a temporary pressure point in our growth trajectory. But no one was buying it anymore. People weren't just frustrated, they were actively leaving. Liam, the young IT associate who'd first found my hidden patches, gave his notice first. Quietly, no dramatic exit interview, just a polite, 2-sentence email. Then came Priya from finance, then Donovan from DevOps. By the middle of that week, 5 more people had resigned, including Rachel. Rachel was a highly respected lead on the architecture team. She was also one of the few people who had watched in uncomfortable silence when I was unceremoniously let go. Her farewell email was short, but incredibly pointed. "We used to build for the future here," it read. "Now we're just duct taping the present." I didn't join this company to consistently lie to clients about uptime and stability. That email, I heard, went viral inside the company. Not publicly, of course, but enough that even the board of directors saw it. From a safe distance, I watched the story of Innovate Solutions continue to unfold, not with bitterness, but with a strange sort of calm. Each resignation email that was quietly forwarded to my personal address, each tentative ping from a former teammate asking for off-the-record advice, just added to the quiet, inevitable reckoning. People weren't leaving for better perks or slightly higher salaries. They were leaving because they had fundamentally lost trust. Trust in the system and, more importantly, trust in the people running it. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to post a single thing online. They were unraveling all on their own. Because when a company builds its entire empire on invisibility and convenience, on the idea that some work just magically happens, it forgets that the people doing that invisible work are also the ones holding up the entire roof. And when you carelessly let go of those people, the collapse that follows isn't sabotage. It's just gravity. Inside the boardroom at Innovate Solutions, things were apparently spinning completely out of control. Mr. Harrison stood with his back to the panoramic window, facing a stern semicircle of board members, all with folded arms and deeply tired eyes. "This is a temporary misalignment of resources," he insisted, his voice reportedly strained. "We're stabilizing as we speak." We've made competitive offers to several replacement engineers, and a new, highly reputable consulting firm is already onboarding. 3 major clients have terminated their contracts in the past month alone. Everett, one of the board members, countered, his voice flat. All of them cited operational instability and a concerning lack of institutional knowledge as their primary reasons. "We're addressing those concerns," Mr. Harrison began, but another board member cut him off sharply. "No, Everett, you're reacting badly and far too late." There was a heavy beat of silence. Then the chair of the board leaned forward, his voice low and gravelly. "This company didn't fall because of bad code, Everett. It fell because we, as leaders, didn't value the people who wrote the good code, the people who kept it alive." Mr. Harrison's face remained stoic, but his eye, I was told, twitched. Then came the sentence that ended it all. "Effective immediately, your role as CEO of Innovate Solutions is suspended, pending further review by this board." The room went utterly still. Mr. Harrison opened his mouth, then closed it again. He turned slowly toward the window, as if somehow the glittering city skyline would offer him an answer, an escape. But there were none. Meanwhile, I was just finishing my second highly productive week as a lead consultant with Ms. Albright at Center Solutions. The systems we were designing were clean, the team was respectful and genuinely collaborative, and I had full creative and technical control. No drama, no politics, just good, solid code, and people who actually cared about building things properly. Every now and then, someone on Ms. Albright's team would ask, a little hesitantly, Did you hear about what's happening at your old company?" And I'd just nod, offer a non-committal and then gently change the subject. Because I didn't need to live in their collapse. It wasn't my story anymore. It wasn't my problem to fix. As I logged off for the day, feeling that quiet satisfaction of good work done well, another message popped into my personal inbox. The sender was unfamiliar, but the subject line was intriguing. Request from the board, quiet conversation. I didn't open it. Not yet. It all really started to unravel for them with a leak. Not a system leak, those I used to handle in my sleep. No, this was different. Someone deep inside Innovate Solutions, probably someone fed up, forwarded a private Slack exchange between 2 senior managers to one of those tech industry gossip boards. It wasn't even particularly malicious, just brutally honest. One manager wrote, "Chloe warned us about this exact failure point in her Q1 review last year. She literally mapped it out for us. We didn't listen." The other replied, "I know." In the one who deleted her original ticket to make room for the new JIRA structure. God, what a mess. The post just exploded. Within hours, a thread titled The Woman They Erased. How Innovate Solutions fired its own foundation was climbing the ranks of Tech Insider Daily. Hundreds of comments, dozens of reposts. Former colleagues of mine started chiming in, anonymously of course, confirming what many in the industry had already suspected. Innovate's infrastructure hadn't collapsed because of bad luck or a sudden, unpredictable failure. It had collapsed because it was being single-handedly carried by one invisible person. Until she left. My name, Chloe Miller, was suddenly trending. Not in vanity metrics, not for some flashy product launch, but for my reputation. The silent engineer who warned them. She built the skeleton. They cut the spine. What happens when you fire quiet genius?
At first, I didn't react.
I was in the middle of reviewing a complex cloud migration plan for Ms. Albright at Centra, and honestly, I had far more interesting and productive things to read than internet gossip threads. But the mentions kept coming. And so did the direct messages. One was from a woman named Jessica Vance, a tech journalist whose work I'd quietly admired for years. Her email subject line was simple, "You don't know me, but I think I know who you are now." Inside, she wrote, "Hi Chloe, I've covered countless tech implosions and corporate flameouts, but your story, it feels different. There's no loud drama, no lawsuits, just a system that logically and predictably broke right where you once held it together. I'd like to talk if you're open to it, on or off the record. If nothing else, I think a lot of women and frankly a lot of undervalued engineers in tech need to hear how you stayed quiet and still, in your own way. 1. Respectfully, Jessica Vance, Senior Writer, Circuit Weekly. I didn't respond right away, but I didn't delete it either. Because even though I hadn't asked for this sudden, unexpected spotlight, I couldn't deny the truth in her words. I was no longer a ghost. Later that week, Centra Solutions held a small team meeting to celebrate hitting their third quarter milestones ahead of schedule. It wasn't a loud, flashy affair. Just a nice catered lunch, a few shared stories about challenges overcome, soft laughter over particularly tricky bugs that had finally been squashed. At one point, Ms. Albright gently tapped her water glass for attention. "Before we wrap up," she said, her voice warm and genuine, "I just want to say that this milestone, this success, happened because we as a team trusted the foundation, not the fleeting buzzwords. And that foundation for this new initiative is Chloe." She looked right at me.
She's not loud.
She doesn't ask for credit, but we see her. We see her work. And we are incredibly lucky to have her. The room applauded, and it wasn't that polite, obligatory applause you sometimes hear. It was real, born out of genuine understanding and respect. And something inside me, something that had been tightly coiled for a very long time, finally softened, just a little. Meanwhile, back in my old company's glass tower, the atmosphere was reportedly splintering. The board hadn't announced a new permanent CEO yet. Internal leadership was fractured and chaotic. Junior employees were tiptoeing around, unsure who they even reported to anymore. A few brave souls, emboldened by the external articles, started speaking more openly on anonymous internal platforms about the Chloe effect. Some of their words, their frustrations, even made it into smaller industry newsletters. Then came the final, public blow. Circuit Weekly, Jessica Vance's publication, published a long, in-depth piece titled, "The Engineer They Let Go and the Collapse That Followed, a Cautionary Tale from Innovate Solutions." The article didn't vilify any single person. It just told the truth. What I had built, what they had ignored, and what had inevitably happened when I left. They didn't quote me directly. I declined to comment for the story, but Jessica Vance had pieced it together beautifully from other sources, and the tone was clear. Integrity doesn't need a microphone. It just needs time to be revealed. That same night, I received another email. This one had no subject line, no flowery introduction. Just a single, direct question. Would you be open to leading something new from the ground up? At the bottom, a signature block from a startup I'd vaguely seen mentioned in passing. Helix Point, a young, ambitious AI-driven systems company, backed by a very respected venture capital firm. Attached was a detailed proposal. The role, Chief Technology Officer. The equity, substantial. The mission, rebuild a better way to scale. Focus on clean, resilient, ethically built infrastructure from the very first line of code. I exhaled slowly. Then I reread the offer. There was no desperate plea, no mention of my past troubles at Innovate. Only a clear vision for my future. I closed the email, not with hesitation, but with a small, genuine smile. Because this time the system didn't just remember my name. It respected it. The applause didn't come all at once. It started slow, a few hands here and there. Then it rippled through the large auditorium like a gentle wave, finding its rhythm, growing stronger. I stood under the soft spotlight at the Helix Point Tech Ethics Summit, looking out at a sea of faces. Developers, founders, engineers, so many of whom had once been exactly where I was. Silent contributors, often overlooked, frequently underestimated. And now they were leaning in. Not because I had shouted, not because I had made a lot of noise to get noticed, but because I had simply told my truth. System integrity, I had said, my voice calm and clear in the microphone, isn't just about clean syntax or achieving perfect uptime.
It's about ethics.
It's about who you choose to be and what you choose to build, especially when no one important seems to be watching. I paused, took a breath. I was erased from a payroll, yes. But they forgot to erase me from the very system I built. And then came the collapse. And with it, for me, a stillness, a quiet understanding that felt a lot like healing. Backstage, Daniel, one of the friendly event team members, handed me a bottle of water. That line you had, he said, his eyes wide, about ethics and who you choose to be when no one's watching.
Wow.
That hit me right in the gut. I smiled, a real smile. It hit me too, I said softly, especially back when no one else seemed to be listening to it. Later, at the networking mixer, a young junior developer came up to me, nervous, clutching a little notebook. "Ms. Miller?" she whispered. I just wanted to say thank you. I always thought being quiet, being the one who just gets the work done without a fuss, meant I was replaceable. But today, listening to you, I saw what quiet can really do. I didn't have a rehearsed, polished answer for her. So I just said the only thing I truly believed. Quiet isn't weak, I told her. It's just unshaken. 2 weeks later, I stepped into my new role as Chief Technology Officer at Helix Point. There were no grand gestures, no splashy headlines. Just a clean whiteboard, a team that listened intently, and the kind of creative freedom that doesn't need to be constantly defended or justified. My old company, Innovate Solutions, they're still rebuilding, I hear. Still looking for that next miracle fix, that next hero to swoop in. But honestly, that's not my story anymore. Because I learned something incredibly powerful through all of this. You don't always have to stay and fight to prove your worth. Sometimes, walking away, quietly, and with your integrity intact, is the very thing that reveals it most clearly. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been that invisible backbone in your own world, the quiet voice in the meeting that no one seemed to hear, or the one diligently holding the system together while others took the credit, please know this. You are not alone. And your impact, your true worth, is not defined by volume or visibility. It's defined by your integrity, by the quality of your work, by the truth you carry. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been in a position where you had to walk away to reclaim your value? Or where you stayed silent and, despite that, still made the biggest difference? Share your story with us. And if you'd like to hear more stories of quiet strength and eventual redemption, please consider subscribing to TK Revenge Story. And if this story moved you and you feel like giving, you can support the channel through Super Thanks. Because giving in its own way is also a part of healing and moving forward. Someone out there, right now, might need to hear that quiet isn't weakness. It's quiet power.